In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. But sometimes, in the spaces between the endless carnage and the grinding horror of galaxy-spanning conflict, there are moments of such bizarre absurdity that they defy comprehension. Picture this scene, if you will. A massive orc war boss, towering over his lesser kin, standing in what passes for his throne room. The chamber is a monument to violence, its walls decorated with the skulls of 100 different species, weapons stripped from fallen enemies, and banners taken from defeated armies. But there, chained in the corner like some enormous mechanical guard dog, sits something that should command respect and terror in equal measure. It's a Space Marine Dreadnought, one of the Imperium's most revered war machines, now reduced to a curiosity, a plaything, a pet for a creature who finds the entire concept of reverence utterly incomprehensible. This isn't fiction, this isn't exaggeration. Throughout the lore of Warhammer 40,000, there are countless instances of orcs capturing, collecting, and yes, keeping broken dreadnoughts, in much the same way a human might keep a particularly impressive trophy on their mantle, or a child might keep a broken toy they're fond of. But the orcs take it further. They interact with these captured war machines. They show them off. They sometimes try to make them fight for entertainment. They certainly use them to intimidate rivals and impress other orcs. In the violent, chaotic, and utterly irrational world of orc culture, a captured dreadnought represents the ultimate status symbol, a testament to a war boss's strength and a source of endless fascination. To understand this phenomenon, we need to dive deep into the alien psychology of the orcs themselves. We need to explore what makes a dreadnought such a prized trophy in the first place. We need to examine the strange relationship between the most savage race in the galaxy and the walking tombs that house some of the Imperium's greatest heroes. What we'll discover is a story that's equal parts horrifying and darkly comedic, a perfect encapsulation of what makes Warhammer 40,000 such a unique setting. Because only in this universe could the fate worse than death, suffered by a revered Space Marine warrior, become the punchline to an orc's idea of a good joke. The phenomenon of orcs keeping broken dreadnoughts isn't just about simple trophy collection. It speaks to deeper truths about orc society, their understanding of warfare, their relationship with technology, and their fundamentally alien way of processing the universe around them. These aren't humans in green skin. These aren't even close to anything we might consider rational actors in a conventional sense. The orcs are products of ancient genetic engineering, living weapons created by the old ones millions of years ago to fight in a war that ended before humanity even existed. They're part animal, part fungus, all violence, and they experience reality through a lens so divorced from human comprehension that their very beliefs can warp the fabric of reality itself. When an orc war boss keeps a broken dreadnought in his personal collection, he's engaging in behavior that makes perfect sense within orc culture while appearing absolutely insane to everyone else. It's trophy hunting taken to its logical extreme. It's the recognition that bigger equals better, always and forever. It's the orc appreciation for a good fight and a worthy opponent. It's status competition made manifest in adamantium and ceramite. And yes, sometimes it's just because the war boss thinks it looks cool and wants to show it off to his rivals. All of these motivations can exist simultaneously in the orc mind without the slightest hint of contradiction, because orcs simply don't experience cognitive dissonance the way other species do. But before we can truly understand why orcs keep broken dreadnoughts as pets, we need to understand the orcs themselves. We need to peer into that green-skinned, violence-obsessed, utterly alien psychology and try to make sense of a species that defies conventional understanding at every turn. We need to understand what drives them, what they value, and how they view the universe and their place in it. Only then can we begin to comprehend why a broken war machine housing a mortally wounded space marine would become a prized possession rather than simply being scrapped for parts or destroyed outright. Understanding orc psychology and culture. To call the orcs simple would be one of the greatest mistakes a commander could make. To call them stupid would be even worse. The Orks are neither simple nor stupid. They're alien in a way that most other races in Warhammer 40,000 aren't. While the Elder are arrogant, the Tau are naive, and the Tyranids are hungry, these are all traits we can understand on some level. But the Orks operate on principles that seem to defy logic itself, yet they've become one of the most successful species in the entire galaxy. They outnumber nearly every other sentient race. They've survived for millions of years. They wage war across countless worlds with technology that shouldn't work but does. And they do it all while having what appears to be the time of their lives. The foundation of Ork psychology is startlingly straightforward. They exist to fight. This isn't metaphorical. This isn't a cultural choice. The Orks were genetically engineered by the Old Ones as living weapons, designed to wage eternal war against the Necrons and their Citan masters during the War in Heaven that raged over 60 million years ago. When that ancient conflict ended and the Old Ones fell, the Orks didn't stop fighting. They couldn't stop fighting. Violence isn't something Orks choose. It's what they are. An Ork that isn't fighting is an Ork that's looking for a fight, planning a fight, preparing for a fight, or recovering from a fight just long enough to get into another one. This fundamental truth shapes everything about their society, their culture, and their behavior. But here's where it gets interesting. Orks don't fight out of hatred. They don't wage war because they're angry, or because they seek conquest for its own sake. They fight because fighting is fun. They genuinely, sincerely enjoy combat in a way that's utterly divorced from the grim necessity that drives other species to war. When an Imperial Guard regiment faces down an Ork horde, those guardsmen are fighting for survival, for the Emperor, for their home world, perhaps out of duty or fear or desperation. The Orks? They're having the time of their lives. Every battle is entertainment. Every enemy is a new challenge. Every victory is cause for celebration, and every defeat just means they need to come back stronger next time. This mentality creates a culture that's simultaneously brutal and bizarrely sporting. Orks respect strength above all else. Size matters to Orks on a primal, genetic level. The bigger an Ork grows, the more fights he's won, the more respect he commands, and the more other Orks will naturally defer to him. This isn't a conscious choice. It's hardwired into their biology through the Wach, the Gestalt psychic field that all Orks generate and share. When a particularly large and successful Ork rises to prominence, other Orks are drawn to him like moths to a flame. They want to be where the fighting is good, and a big boss promises the best fights. This brings us to the concept of trophies in Ork culture. For a species that lives to fight, the evidence of past victories becomes crucial for establishing and maintaining status. An Ork's standing in his society isn't determined by birthright or accumulated wealth in any conventional sense, although teeth, the Ork currency, certainly help. No, an Ork's status comes from his reputation as a fighter, and that reputation needs to be backed up with tangible proof. This is where trophies come in. Skulls of defeated enemies, weapons taken from fallen foes, pieces of destroyed vehicles, these all serve as physical evidence of an Ork's prowess in battle. But not all trophies are created equal. There's a hierarchy to Ork trophy collection that makes perfect sense within their cultural framework. A Gretchen skull, worthless. They're everywhere, weak, and killing them proves nothing. A human skull, better, at least humans fight back sometimes. A Space Marine helmet? Now we're talking. Space Marines are proper opponents, tough and skilled, and taking one down is worth bragging about. An Elder helmet might be even better. Those pointy-eared gits are tricky and fast. But a Dreadnought? A whole, entire Dreadnought, even a broken one. That's a trophy that announces to everyone within viewing distance that the Ork who captured it is not to be trifled with. The Death Skulls clan in particular has elevated looting and trophy collection to an art form. These blue-painted Orks are the galaxy's most enthusiastic scavengers, grabbing everything that isn't nailed down, and quite a few things that are. They believe blue is a lucky color, and they extend that belief to everything they acquire. A Death Skull's war boss might have a collection of trophies that would make a museum curator weep, except it's all jumbled together in a pile of useful stuff that the boss hasn't gotten around to using yet. For the Death Skulls, a captured dreadnought represents the ultimate acquisition, a piece of enemy technology so impressive that even other orcs can't help but be impressed. The cultural significance of trophies extends beyond mere bragging rights. In a society where might makes right and the biggest fighter is in charge, displaying trophies serves multiple practical purposes. It intimidates rivals who might be thinking about challenging the boss. It impresses potential followers who want to join a winning warband. It provides conversation pieces for when other bosses come around, because yes, orcs do engage in what passes for social interaction between all the fighting. And perhaps most importantly for the orc mentality, trophies are reminders of good fights, victories worth remembering, enemies worth defeating. Orcs also possess a uniquely malleable relationship with truth and reality. Their collective psychic field, the Wah, doesn't just draw them together and make them stronger in numbers. It actually influences reality in subtle ways. If enough orcs believe something strongly enough, it can become true in some limited fashion. This isn't magic in any conventional sense. It's a feature of their genetic engineering, a defense mechanism that allows them to function as living weapons even when cut off from proper supplies and equipment. This psychic resonance means that orc culture is self-reinforcing. If everyone believes that red makes things go faster, then within the orc psychic field, red things do go faster. If everyone believes that a particular trophy is especially impressive, then it becomes especially impressive. This brings us to an important point about orc psychology. They can hold contradictory beliefs simultaneously without any cognitive dissonance whatsoever. An orc can believe that he's the toughest fighter in the galaxy while also acknowledging that his boss is tougher. He can think that his clan is the best while respecting the achievements of rival clans. He can know that a dreadnought is a dangerous enemy while also viewing it as a potential trophy. These contradictions don't bother orcs the way they would bother humans because orcs simply don't process information the same way. Everything exists in the moment, everything is straightforward, and if two things seem to conflict, well, that's just how it is. The orc relationship with defeated enemies is particularly relevant to understanding why they keep dreadnoughts. Unlike many species, orcs don't harbor grudges in any long-term sense. They don't seek revenge as a motivation for warfare. If an enemy beats them, that just means the enemy was tougher, which makes them a better opponent, which makes fighting them more fun. There's a strange kind of respect in orc culture for worthy adversaries. Not respect in the sense of admiration or honor, but respect in the sense of acknowledging capability. An orc who survives a fight with a particularly tough opponent might well keep something from that opponent to remember the experience, not out of hatred, but because it was a good scrap. This attitude extends to how orcs view Space Marines and their weapons of war. Space Marines are, in the orc estimation, proper enemies. They're tough, they fight hard, they come in flashy colors, and they're satisfyingly difficult to kill. An orc doesn't hate Space Marines the way a Chaos Space Marine might hate his loyalist cousins. Instead, orcs appreciate Space Marines for being good opponents. They're big, they're strong, they've got impressive technology, and fighting them is a proper challenge. When an orc defeats a Space Marine, there's a sense of genuine accomplishment. And when an orc defeats an entire dreadnought, that's a story worth telling for years. The nature of dreadnoughts. To truly appreciate why orcs covet broken dreadnoughts as trophies, we must first understand what these war machines represent within the Imperium of man. A dreadnought isn't simply a weapon or a vehicle, it's a walking reliquary, a fusion of the sacred and the mechanical, a living tomb that contains centuries or even millennia of experience and battlefield wisdom. These armored walkers are revered within Space Marine chapters as the embodiment of the chapter's history and traditions, piloted by heroes who have given literally everything in service to the Emperor. The origins of dreadnought technology stretch back into the mists of the dark age of technology, that lost golden age of human achievement before Old Night, and the age of strife plunged humanity into millennia of darkness. The fundamental design has endured across 10,000 years, though the knowledge of how to build new ones has been largely lost. Each dreadnought is a priceless artifact, maintained through ritual and prayer as much as through technical skill, and the loss of even one is considered a catastrophic blow to a chapter. The process of interment in a dreadnought is offered only to the most exceptional space marines who have suffered mortal wounds that place them beyond the considerable healing capabilities of space marine apothecaries. When a hero falls in battle, grievously wounded but not quite dead, he faces a choice: accept death with honor, or agree to be entombed within the armored sarcophagus of a dreadnought, continuing his service to the chapter and the Emperor indefinitely. This isn't presented as a reward, though it's often described as an honor. It's a choice between death and a form of existence that's both more and less than life. Once a space marine agrees to interment, the process is irreversible. The tech marine and the apothecaries work together to extract what remains of the dying warrior from his shattered body. What's left, often little more than a torso, portions of limbs, and most importantly, the brain and a few vital organs, is placed within the armored sarcophagus at the heart of the dreadnought. Neural links connect the pilot's consciousness directly to the war machine's systems, allowing him to control it as if it were his own body, though the sensation is described as fundamentally different from piloting a normal body. The armament of a dreadnought reflects its role as a walking weapons platform. A typical dreadnought might carry a close combat weapon on one arm, perhaps a massive power fist capable of crushing enemy armor, and a heavy weapon on the other, like an assault cannon or lascannon. Some dreadnoughts are configured for specific roles, with twin-linked heavy weapons for fire support or dual close combat weapons for tearing through enemy formations. Regardless of configuration, a dreadnought represents a concentration of firepower that few enemies can withstand, backed by armor thick enough to shrug off hits that would destroy lesser vehicles. But the true horror and the true honor of the dreadnought lies in the experience of the pilot himself. Between battles, dreadnoughts are placed in stasis, kept in the chapter's most sacred vaults in a state of suspended animation. This sleep isn't peaceful. It isn't restful. It's a void, a darkness so complete that many pilots speak of losing themselves in it, forgetting who they were, existing in a liminal state between life and death. When awakened, the transition back to consciousness is jarring and disorienting, a violent resurrection that tears the pilot from nothingness back into painful awareness. Over the centuries or millennia of this cycle, awakening, fighting, sleeping, the pilot begins to change. The organic portions of their being slowly deteriorate despite the best efforts of the chapter's apothecaries. The neural connections that link them to their metal body gradually take precedence over their fading memories of flesh. Many ancient dreadnoughts report that they can no longer remember what it felt like to walk on two legs, to touch something with human hands, to exist as anything other than a walking war machine. The human personality remains, but it's increasingly buried beneath layers of mechanical existence and battle-hardened experience. On the battlefield, a dreadnought is a terror to behold. They stride through enemy fire that would shred normal warriors, their thick armor turning aside all but the most powerful weapons. Their arsenal unleashes devastation on enemy formations, assault cannons tearing through infantry, power fists crushing vehicles, missile launchers raining death from above. And because they're piloted by space marines with centuries of combat experience, they employ tactics and strategies that capitalize on every advantage. Dreadnought doesn't just attack. It reads the battlefield, identifies weak points, and strikes with precision born of innumerable battles. For the enemies of the Imperium, facing a dreadnought is a daunting prospect. The psychological impact alone is significant. These towering war machines advance with inexorable purpose, shrugging off fire that would destroy entire squads of normal troops. Their war cries, broadcast through external speakers, echo the voices of heroes from ages past, and they simply don't stop. A dreadnought will continue fighting as long as its systems function, undeterred by injuries that would kill a normal being, driven by a will that has already chosen to endure beyond death. Why orcs keep broken dreadnoughts? Now we arrive at the heart of the matter. With an understanding of both orc psychology and the nature of dreadnoughts, we can finally examine why these broken war machines become treasured possessions, rather than being destroyed or stripped for parts. The answer, like most things involving orcs, is simultaneously straightforward and bizarrely complex, a mixture of practical considerations, cultural values, and that peculiar orc mindset that defies conventional understanding. First and foremost, a broken dreadnought is a trophy of unparalleled value in orc society. Remember, orcs measure status by the quality of their enemies and the impressiveness of their victories. Taking down a dreadnought isn't like killing a normal space marine. It requires either overwhelming force, clever tactics, yes, some orcs do use those, or a combination of both. These machines are designed to withstand punishment that would obliterate entire squads of lesser beings. They carry weapons that can tear through orc mobs like a power claw through a Gretchen, and they're piloted by warriors with centuries of combat experience. When an orc war boss can point to a captured dreadnought and say, "Me and da boys brought that down," he's making a statement about his warband's capability that no amount of boasting could match. It's physical proof of a serious fight, tangible evidence that this particular boss and his followers tangle with some of the Imperium's most dangerous assets and win. In the competitive world of orc politics, where everyone is constantly jockeying for position and trying to prove they're the toughest, hardest, and best, having a dreadnought trophy is like holding a winning hand in a game where the stakes are life and death. But there's more to it than simple bragging rights. The sheer impressiveness of a dreadnought, even a broken one, serves multiple practical purposes within orc society. For one, it's an excellent tool for intimidation. When a rival boss comes to visit, perhaps thinking about challenging for leadership, walking past a chained dreadnought tends to make them think twice. It's a not-so-subtle reminder that the current boss fights enemies this dangerous on a regular basis. It raises the question in the challenger's mind. If this boss can take down a dreadnought, what chance do I have? The rarity factor also plays a crucial role. Unlike Space Marine helmets or Imperial Guard laser guns, which are relatively common on battlefields where the Imperium is involved, dreadnoughts are genuinely rare. Most orc boys will never even see one in their entire lives, let alone fight one. For a war boss to not only have encountered a dreadnought, but to have actually captured one more or less intact, that immediately sets him apart from 99% of other orcs. It's the difference between having a nice trophy and having the trophy, the one thing that makes every other orc who sees it stop and take notice. There's also an entertainment value to keeping a broken dreadnought that shouldn't be underestimated. Orcs find violence and destruction endlessly entertaining, but they also appreciate spectacle and novelty. A dreadnought provides both. It's huge, it's imposing, and depending on how broken it is, it might still move, make noise, or even retain some functionality. Some orcs have been known to try to get their captured dreadnoughts to move or fight, treating them like gladiatorial beasts. While this rarely works out the way they hope, the attempt itself is considered great fun. Consider the storytelling aspect of trophy keeping. Orcs love to tell stories about their fights. It's one of their primary forms of entertainment and social interaction. Having a dreadnought provides an endless source of stories. "See that dent? That's where it nearly got me with its power fist. But I was too quick, see? Jumped right over it and planted me shooter right in its face." Every scratch, every battle scar on the dreadnought becomes part of the narrative, a physical reminder of specific moments in what was presumably an epic battle. The social currency of these stories cannot be overstated. In a culture where oral tradition is primary, most orcs can't read or write, and those who can generally don't bother. Being able to tell a good fight story is valuable. Being able to illustrate that story with actual physical evidence is even better. And when your evidence is a several-ton war machine that required your entire warband to bring down, you're going to be telling that story for the rest of your life, and other orcs are going to listen because they can see the proof right there. There's another factor at play, the concept of bigness in orc psychology. Orcs are genetically programmed to respect size. Bigger is always better in orc society. It's not just that larger orcs tend to be in charge, it's that orcs instinctively defer to anything bigger than themselves. A dreadnought standing around twice the height of a normal orc, and orcs are already larger than humans, inherently commands a certain respect, simply through its dimensions. Even broken and defeated, a dreadnought is impressively big, and that bigness has value in and of itself within orc culture. The competitive element extends beyond just impressing rivals. Different orc clans compete with each other in various ways. The evil suns try to have the fastest vehicles. The bad moons try to have the flashiest guns. The death skulls try to have the most and best loot. In this environment of constant one-upmanship, having a rare and impressive trophy gives a war boss ammunition in the ongoing cultural competition. Your truck might be fast, but have you got a dreadnought? No? Didn't think so. There's also a peculiar form of respect that orcs extend to worthy opponents, and this factors into why they might keep, rather than destroy, a defeated dreadnought. The orc concept of a good fight is central to their entire worldview. They don't want easy victories, they want challenges. An enemy that goes down without a fight is boring and disappointing. But an enemy that makes you work for it, that forces you to use all your strength and cunning, that's valuable. A dreadnought, by its nature, provides exactly that kind of fight. In keeping a broken dreadnought, the orc war boss is in some sense honoring the quality of the fight it provided. This isn't sentiment exactly. Orcs don't feel sympathy or pity, but they do recognize when something put up a proper scrap. The fact that it took dozens or hundreds of boys to bring down, the fact that it probably killed quite a few of them in the process, the fact that it didn't give up even when clearly outmatched, all of this registers as admirable in the orc mindset. Not admirable in a noble or heroic sense, but admirable in the sense of that was a proper enemy. The potential uses of a captured dreadnought also factor into the decision to keep it rather than destroy it. Orc mech boys are always looking for interesting technology to tinker with, and a dreadnought presents a unique puzzle. It's more sophisticated than most orc technology, but not so alien that a mech boy can't see the basic principles at work. The weapons might be salvageable, or at least provide inspiration for orky versions. The armor could be repurposed. The power plant might be adaptable. While an intact, functioning dreadnought is far too complex for most orcs to operate, a broken one becomes a parts bin of interesting components. Orc fascination with Imperial technology. The orc relationship with technology is one of the strangest aspects of their culture. A bizarre mixture of instinctive understanding, complete disregard for safety, and genuine creativity that produces results that shouldn't work, but do. To understand why orcs are fascinated with Imperial technology in general, and dreadnoughts in particular, we need to examine how orcs think about and interact with the machines they use and encounter. Orcs are, in a very literal sense, genetically programmed to understand technology. This isn't learned knowledge passed down through formal education, it's genetic memory. Fragments of the incredibly advanced science their Krork ancestors possessed, now degraded and simplified into intuitive mechanical skill. An orc mech boy doesn't need to study engineering. He just knows how things work, in the same way that a human knows how to breathe. This instinctive understanding is one of the gifts left by the Old Ones, the ancient beings who created the Krork as living weapons. However, this instinctive knowledge is far from perfect. Modern orcs have lost most of the sophisticated scientific understanding their Krork forebears possessed. What remains is practical, hands-on knowledge focused almost entirely on making things that fight better. An orc mech boy can look at a pile of scrap and instinctively know how to turn it into a functioning, by Ork standards, weapon or vehicle. But he can't explain the principles behind why it works. He doesn't use mathematics or physics. He just builds things that his genetic memory tells him should work. And usually, they do. The collective psychic field that all Orks generate, the WAG, plays a role in making their technology function. The Gestalt psychic field has a mild reality warping effect that allows Ork technology to work when it shouldn't by conventional physics. A shooter that's essentially a metal tube with a trigger might not function for a human, but in the hands of an Ork, surrounded by other Orks, who all expect it to work, it does. The gun has working parts. The psychic field just smooths over the rough edges where proper engineering would normally be required. When Orks encounter Imperial technology, their reaction depends on what kind of Ork they are. Regular Ork boys mostly just want to know if they can use it to hit things harder or shoot things better. If the answer is yes, they'll grab it. If the answer is no, they might take it anyway because it looks cool. But mech boys view Imperial technology with a mixture of interest, disdain, and opportunism. The interest comes from seeing different approaches to solving mechanical problems. The disdain comes from their belief that Ork technology is inherently superior. The opportunism comes from recognizing that Imperial tech can be looted for parts. The Death Skulls clan has elevated looting to a high art. These blue-painted Orks believe that looted equipment is inherently lucky, which, given the Ork psychic field, might actually make it luckier when they use it. Death Skulls will steal anything that isn't nailed down, and anything that is nailed down but looks like it might be worth the effort to pry loose. They're the Ork equivalent of magpies, attracted to anything shiny, interesting, or potentially useful. A Death Skulls mob after a battle will strip the battlefield of everything, from weapons to vehicle parts, to random pieces of equipment that caught someone's eye. But Dreadnoughts represent a special category of Imperial technology that particularly fascinates Orks. They're big, which Orks automatically respect. They're obviously powerful, which Orks appreciate. They're complex, which intrigues mech boys who like a challenge. And they're rare, which makes them valuable. A Dreadnought isn't like a standard Imperial vehicle that the Orks have probably encountered dozens of times before. Each Dreadnought is unique, hand-maintained over centuries, a relic of ancient technology that the Imperium can no longer fully replicate. From a mech boy's perspective, a captured Dreadnought is an absolute treasure trove. The weapon systems alone are worth studying. Dreadnoughts often mount heavy weapons that would normally require a vehicle chassis to support. Assault cannons that could shred entire mobs of Orks, power fists capable of tearing through the toughest armor. These aren't the standard issue equipment a mech boy sees on regular Space Marines. These are specialist weapons, each one a masterwork of Imperial engineering. The power plant is another point of fascination. Dreadnoughts need tremendous amounts of energy to operate, powering not just their movement and weapons, but also the life support systems keeping the pilot alive. Whatever reactor or power cell system the Dreadnought uses is going to be more sophisticated than what the Orks typically have access to. A curious mech boy might spend years trying to understand how it works, probably destroying several Gretchen in the process of experimentation, but potentially learning something that could be applied to other Ork technology. Most attempts by Orks to actually operate a captured Dreadnought fail spectacularly. The neural interface requires a specific type of connection that Orks don't naturally possess. The control systems are designed for Space Marine reflexes and sensory input, not for Ork biology. The weapons systems have safety features and firing protocols that Orks neither understand nor care about. And even if an Ork could somehow get a Dreadnought to move, controlling it effectively would require training and practice that most Orks lack the patience for. But failure doesn't discourage Ork mech boys. In fact, explosions and catastrophic malfunctions are considered part of the learning process. If your attempt to activate a Dreadnought results in it taking 2 steps and then falling over, crushing several Gretchen in the process, well, that's hilarious and also informative. You've learned that pressing that button makes it fall over. Next time, try a different button. The scientific method, Ork style. The grim fate of the pilot. Perhaps the most grim aspect of Orks keeping broken dreadnoughts as trophies is the fate of the Space Marine pilot entombed within. These warriors, already having endured the trauma of mortal wounds and the horror of being permanently sealed within a sarcophagus, face a final indignity that would break lesser beings. Understanding their fate provides crucial context for why Space Marine chapters expend such tremendous resources attempting to recover captured dreadnoughts. When a dreadnought is brought down in battle, several scenarios are possible regarding the pilot's condition. In the best case, the pilot died when the dreadnought was destroyed. His suffering ended and his service complete. The dreadnought becomes an empty shell, a relic to be recovered and honored, but the warrior within has found peace. This is the outcome that Space Marine chaplains pray for when a dreadnought falls in battle. But dreadnoughts are built to protect their pilots even under catastrophic conditions. The sarcophagus at the heart of the machine is heavily armored and contains redundant life support systems. A dreadnought can suffer tremendous external damage while the pilot inside remains alive, trapped in a broken shell, unable to move or communicate, but still conscious. This nightmare scenario is what haunts Space Marine commanders when a dreadnought is captured by Orks. The Ork treatment of a living pilot is, in many ways, worse than deliberate torture. Orks don't really understand or care about causing psychological suffering. They're not trying to break the pilot's spirit or extract information. They simply don't think about the pilot at all most of the time. To them, the dreadnought is a thing, an impressive machine that happens to have some meat inside. The fact that the meat is conscious and suffering doesn't register as particularly important or interesting. For a Space Marine pilot still alive in a captured dreadnought, the experience is beyond nightmarish. He can likely still perceive his surroundings through whatever sensory systems remain functional, but he cannot move, cannot fight, cannot even end his own suffering. He's aware of Ork hands on his shell, of being hauled away as a prize, of being chained and displayed. If the Orks manage to preserve some of the dreadnought systems, he might retain hearing, forced to listen to Orks celebrating his defeat, telling stories about how they brought him down, laughing at jokes he cannot understand. The isolation is absolute. Space Marines are conditioned from recruitment to value brotherhood above all else. They fight as squads, chapters, extensions of a unified whole. A dreadnought pilot is already isolated in many ways, separated from his brothers by the metal shell that contains him. But that isolation is incomplete so long as he serves alongside them. In Ork captivity, that last connection is severed. He is utterly alone, surrounded by enemies, with no hope of rescue unless his chapter mounts a recovery operation. The passage of time becomes especially cruel. Dreadnoughts are designed to function for centuries, their life support systems incredibly robust. A pilot might survive for weeks, months, or even years in Ork captivity, depending on how much damage the systems have sustained. Every moment of that time is spent in helpless awareness, unable to die, unable to fight, unable to do anything but exist in the darkness of his sarcophagus, while Orks parade him around as a curiosity. Some Ork attempts to activate captured dreadnoughts can inadvertently cause additional suffering to living pilots. Mech boys poking at neural interfaces might trigger involuntary responses, forcing the pilot to experience phantom sensations of movement or combat without being able to control anything. Power surges from Ork experimentation with the dreadnought systems might cause pain through neural feedback. The pilot cannot scream, cannot beg them to stop, cannot even die through an act of will. When Space Marines do manage to recover captured dreadnoughts, the state they find the pilots in, if the pilots still live, is often tragic. Some have been driven mad by their captivity, their minds unable to cope with the prolonged isolation and helplessness. Others have sustained additional damage from Ork experimentation that's rendered them unable to communicate or function even within the limited capacity a dreadnought pilot has. A few maintain their sanity, but are so traumatized that they beg to be allowed to die rather than return to service. Mechboy experiments and modifications. To understand the full picture of why orcs keep broken dreadnoughts, we must examine the perspective of the orc mechboys, the technical specialists whose genetic memory and innate understanding of machinery makes them both fascinated by and dangerous to any complex technology they encounter. A dreadnought, from a mechboy's perspective, is simultaneously a puzzle, a challenge, a learning opportunity, and a potential source of valuable components. When a mechboy first examines a captured dreadnought, his reaction differs markedly from that of regular orc boys. Where a normal orc sees an impressive trophy and maybe some useful parts, a mechboy sees systems, mechanisms, and engineering solutions to problems he's encountered in his own work. The weapons mounting systems might suggest better ways to attach big guns to trucks. The armor configuration might inspire new vehicle designs. The power distribution network might offer insights into how to get more energy to where it's needed without everything exploding. The experimentation that follows takes many forms. Some mechboys adopt a systematic approach, unusual for orcs, but not unheard of among the more methodical members of the profession. They'll carefully disassemble portions of the dreadnought, examining each component, testing it, trying to understand its function and construction. These mechboys might spend months or even years working on a single captured dreadnought, learning everything they can from it before moving on to other projects. Other mechboys take a more direct approach. They'll try to activate systems by trial and error, pressing buttons, connecting wires, applying power until something happens. This frequently results in explosions, fires, or system failures that destroy whatever they were working on. But occasionally, something actually works. And when it does, the mechboy learns something valuable about how that particular system functions. The fact that dozens of Gretchen might die in the process of these experiments doesn't bother anyone involved. The attempts to actually operate a captured dreadnought deserve special attention. Mechboys understand, in their way, that the dreadnought is meant to be controlled by whoever's inside it. They've seen how orc-def dreads work, with pilots wired into the controls. The similarity is obvious, which makes mechboys believe they should be able to figure out how to make the Imperial version work for orcs. This belief drives countless experiments in neural interfacing, control systems, and biomechanical integration. Some of the most successful orc modifications to captured dreadnoughts involve simplification, rather than trying to make the existing systems work. A mechboy might rip out the complex Imperial targeting system and replace it with a much simpler orc equivalent. He might remove the sophisticated power distribution network and install a more direct but less efficient orc power system. He might strip out the neural interface entirely and install purely mechanical controls. The result is a machine that's less capable than the original dreadnought, but more understandable and controllable by orc standards. These hybrid creations, when they work at all, become legends among mechboys. A dreadnought that's been successfully orked up represents the pinnacle of mechboy achievement, demonstrating both technical skill and creative problem-solving. The mechboy responsible for such a creation gains tremendous status, with other mechboys seeking him out to learn his techniques. Cultural significance and trophy display. The practice of keeping broken dreadnoughts transcends mere trophy collection to become a cultural touchstone within orc society, shaping narratives, establishing hierarchies, and creating traditions that persist across generations of greenskins. To fully appreciate this phenomenon, we must examine how dreadnought trophies function as cultural objects, rather than just physical prizes. In the oral tradition that dominates orc culture, physical objects serve as anchors for stories. Without written records that most orcs can access or care about, the tales of great battles and legendary war bosses are preserved through repeated telling and retelling. But memories fade, details get confused, and stories change in the retelling. A physical trophy, especially one as impressive and durable as a dreadnought, serves as proof that the story really happened, that the battle wasn't just boasting or exaggeration. The stories told around dreadnought trophies develop elaborate detail through repeated tellings. The battle where it was captured becomes legendary, with each orc who participated adding their own perspective. The number of orcs who claim to have personally dealt the killing blow tends to grow over time, but the basic narrative remains consistent because the evidence is right there, visible for all to see. These narratives serve important social functions. They establish shared history for the warband, creating a sense of identity and continuity that's unusual in orc culture. They provide entertainment during the periods between battles when orcs might otherwise get restless and fight among themselves. They offer younger orcs role models and aspirations, showing them what's possible if they fight hard enough and get lucky enough. The challenge aspect of dreadnought ownership creates interesting cultural dynamics. Other war bosses, hearing about a particularly impressive trophy, might see it as a challenge to their own status. If he's tough enough to bring down a tin boy, then I need to prove I'm tougher by bringing down two. This competitive drive leads to dreadnought hunting becoming a kind of status game among the most ambitious orc war bosses. The inter-clan competition around trophies extends to dreadnoughts as well. A Bad Moons war boss with a dreadnought can lord it over other Bad Moons bosses who only have more common trophies. A Death Skulls boss with a dreadnought has ultimate bragging rights at any gathering of looters. A Goth boss with a dreadnought has physical proof that his warriors are the toughest in any fight. The trophy transcends individual achievement to become a point of clan pride. When war bosses from different tribes or clans meet, there's always an element of competition and potential conflict. Trophy displays become a form of non-violent competition. Look at what I've killed versus look at what I've killed, with the winner being whoever has the most impressive collection. A dreadnought trophy is nearly unbeatable in these competitions. The brutal comedy of Warhammer 40K. The phenomenon of orcs keeping broken dreadnoughts as pets and prizes encapsulates everything that makes Warhammer 40,000 such a unique and compelling setting. It's simultaneously horrifying and darkly comedic, tragic and absurd, a perfect example of how the setting blends the grim with the ridiculous in ways that couldn't exist anywhere else. From the Imperial perspective, this practice represents one of the most terrible fates imaginable for their honored dead. Warriors who have already given everything, who have endured wounds that would kill normal men a dozen times over, who have chosen to continue serving despite being sealed in mechanical tombs. These heroes don't deserve to end their existence as curiosities in an orc warboss's trophy collection. The indignity of it, the reduction of the sacred to the profane, the transformation of reverence into mockery, it's an affront to everything the Imperium stands for. But the orcs don't care about any of that. They can't care because they simply don't process reality in those terms. They don't see sacred versus profane. They see big versus small, tough versus weak, impressive versus boring. A dreadnought is impressive, therefore it's worth keeping. The fact that someone else thinks it's sacred just makes it more valuable as a trophy, because it means that someone else will be upset when you take it, which is funny. This fundamental disconnect between how the Imperium and the Orks view the same object creates a kind of cosmic joke that's central to Warhammer 40,000's appeal. The setting is grim-dark, yes, presenting a future where there is only war and the laughter of thirsting gods. But it's also occasionally absurd in the best possible way, finding humor in the darkest corners of its universe through the lens of alien psychology that's just comprehensible enough to be funny while remaining genuinely alien. The orc practice of keeping dreadnought trophies also illustrates important truths about what makes orcs work as antagonists in this setting. They're not purely comedic relief, though they certainly provide comic moments. A captured dreadnought is a genuine tragedy, a source of horror and suffering for the pilot inside, and a motivator for desperate recovery missions by Space Marine chapters. But the Orks' approach to their trophy is comedic in its complete lack of self-awareness. They genuinely don't understand why the Space Marines are so upset about this. This duality makes Orks more interesting than purely villainous or purely comic races would be. They're dangerous, they kill billions, they destroy entire worlds. But they do it all with a kind of savage innocence, not fighting out of hatred or malice, but because fighting is what they do, what they are, what they were literally created to do. When an Ork keeps a broken dreadnought as a pet, he's not trying to be cruel. He's just being an Ork, operating according to Ork values and Ork psychology, completely oblivious to how disturbing his behavior appears to everyone else. The practice also serves important narrative functions. It provides motivation for Space Marine characters in stories, driving them to undertake dangerous recovery missions or seek vengeance against specific Ork warbands. It creates moral complexity by showing that even good actions, like recovering a fallen brother, might not actually improve the situation if the pilot has been driven mad by captivity. It offers opportunities for tragedy, for heroism, for desperate last stands, for all the narrative beats that make for compelling stories. Yet there's something almost refreshing about the Ork perspective in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium. While everyone else is caught up in ancient grudges, religious fanaticism, or existential dread, the Orks are just out there having fun. They're not tortured by the burden of consciousness like the Eldar. They're not consumed by despair like the Imperium. They're not driven by incomprehensible hunger like the Tyranids. They're just fighting because fighting is fun, and keeping trophies of their victories, because trophies are cool. This contrast between the Ork experience of the setting and everyone else's experience creates much of the dark humor that makes Warhammer 40,000 appealing. The Imperium treats every battle like it's the end of the world, because from their perspective, it might be. The Orks treat every battle like it's the best party ever, because from their perspective, it is. The fact that these two worldviews must coexist and conflict creates endless opportunities for both tragedy and comedy. As we've explored throughout this deep dive into Ork trophy-keeping behavior, the practice reveals layers of complexity beneath what initially appears to be simple savagery. Ork psychology, their relationship with technology, their cultural values around trophies and status, their competitive social structures, all of these factors combine to make keeping broken dreadnoughts not just possible, but almost inevitable, given the right circumstances. And perhaps most importantly, it's brilliant world-building. The kind of detail that makes a fictional universe feel real and lived in, that creates those moments when you realize how all the different pieces fit together, that generates fan theories and discussions and creative works. The fact that we can write thousands of words analyzing why Orks keep broken dreadnoughts speaks to the depth and richness of the Warhammer 40,000 setting. So the next time you're playing a game, reading a novel, or just thinking about the grim darkness of the far future, spare a thought for those broken dreadnoughts in Ork trophy halls. Consider the horror of the Space Marine pilots, who might still live within them. Appreciate the complete indifference of the Ork war bosses, who keep them as curiosities. Recognize the tragedy, the absurdity, and the dark comedy of it all, because that's Warhammer 40,000 in microcosm. It's terrible, it's hilarious, it's both at once, and it's glorious. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the weird and wonderful world of Warhammer 40,000 lore, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. There's always more grim darkness to explore, more bizarre faction behaviors to analyze, and more fascinating details to uncover in this incredible setting. Thanks for watching, and remember, in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war, but sometimes there's also really cool trophies. The mechanics of capture. Understanding how Orks actually manage to capture dreadnoughts intact enough to serve as trophies requires examining the brutal reality of battles between these forces. A dreadnought isn't an easy target to bring down, let alone capture relatively undamaged. The process involves a combination of overwhelming numbers, tactical cunning. Yes, orcs can be cunning when they want to be. Sheer bloody-minded determination, and often a significant amount of luck. When an orc warband encounters a dreadnought on the battlefield, the initial reaction is almost always enthusiastic violence. Orcs see a big, tough enemy and immediately want to fight it. The warboss or nob in charge might recognize that this is a special target, something worth capturing rather than just destroying. But getting that message across to hundreds of battle-crazed boys in the middle of a fight is challenging at best. The most common method of capture involves simple attrition. The orcs will swarm the dreadnought from all directions, accepting horrific casualties as the war machine's weapons tear through their ranks. Assault cannons shred entire mobs. Power fists crush orcs by the dozen. But the orcs keep coming, wave after wave, until the dreadnought's ammunition runs low or its weapon systems overheat from sustained firing. Then they close in for melee combat, attacking the joints, the weapon mounts, anything that looks vulnerable. Some orc warbands, particularly those of the Blood Axes clan, who are known for their relative tactical sophistication, will attempt more coordinated approaches. They might use killer Khans or deaf dreads to engage the dreadnought directly, while regular boys flank it. They might deploy looters with stolen heavy weapons to suppress the dreadnought from range. They might even use actual tactics, like feints and ambushes, to separate the dreadnought from its supporting forces before overwhelming it with numbers. The goal in these engagements is to disable rather than destroy. Orc mech boys who are present during the battle might shout instructions to the attacking boys. "Don't blow it up, you gits! The boss wants it in one piece!" Whether these instructions are followed depends largely on how excited the boys are and how much they're thinking about orders versus smashing things. Often, the result is a dreadnought that's heavily damaged but still recognizable, its weapons destroyed or disabled, its legs crippled, its armor cracked and dented, but its core structure intact. The moment of actual capture, when the dreadnought is finally brought down and immobilized, is crucial. This is when a warboss who wants a trophy needs to assert control quickly, before his boys tear the thing apart in their excitement. He needs to get chains on it, get it hauled away from the immediate battlefield, and make it clear that this prize belongs to him personally. Any orc who tries to claim parts of it without permission is likely to lose more than just the argument. Transport presents its own challenges. A dreadnought, even a broken one, weighs several tons. Moving it requires significant effort, usually involving multiple trucks, copious amounts of chain, and dozens of Gretchen to actually do the heavy lifting. The journey back to the orc base camp is often eventful, with the captured dreadnought being paraded through any settlements they pass, shown off to other orc tribes, and generally treated as the grand prize it is. Once back at base, securing the dreadnought becomes a priority. It's chained down, usually in a prominent location where everyone can see it, with enough restraints that even if it's somehow reactivated, it couldn't do much damage. Mech boys immediately begin examining it, testing systems, poking at things they probably shouldn't poke at, and generally beginning the long process of understanding what they've captured. The capture of a dreadnought is also a teaching moment for younger orcs. Veterans of the fight will gather the younger boys and recount how it went down, pointing out what worked and what didn't. See, when we all rushed it from the front, that's when it killed the most of us. But when we got round the side, that's when we started winning. These lessons, crude as they are, help the warband become more effective at taking on similarly tough enemies in the future. There's also the matter of casualties sustained during the capture. A properly functioning dreadnought can kill dozens or even hundreds of orcs before being brought down. The survivors don't mourn these losses in any human sense. Orcs don't really do grief, but they do remember who died and how. The captured dreadnought becomes a monument to those fallen boys, a physical reminder that this fight cost them, but they won anyway. Some war bosses develop specific strategies for dreadnought hunting based on past experiences. They might equip certain squads with rockets, specifically for taking out the legs. They might train tank busters to target weapon systems first. They might even develop signals or calls that tell their boys to switch from kill it mode to capture it mode mid-battle. This level of planning is unusual for orcs, but the value of a Dreadnought trophy can inspire unusual behavior. The psychological impact on the Orc warband after successfully capturing a Dreadnought is significant. Morale, to the extent that term applies to orcs, soars. The boys feel invincible, like they can take on anything the universe throws at them. This confidence can be both beneficial, leading to more aggressive and effective fighting, and dangerous, leading to overconfidence and taking on fights they can't win. But in the immediate aftermath of a successful capture, the warband is riding high on victory and won't hear any suggestions about caution. Famous war bosses and their Dreadnought collections. Throughout the history of Warhammer 40,000 lore, certain Orc war bosses have become particularly noted for their Dreadnought collections, their trophy hauls becoming legendary among both Orcs and their enemies. These examples illustrate the practice at its most extreme, showing what happens when a particularly successful war boss makes Dreadnought hunting a priority. The most famous of these is undoubtedly Gazkul Mag Uruk Thraka, the self-proclaimed prophet of Gork and Mork, the beast of Armageddon, and arguably the most dangerous orc in the current galaxy. While records of Gazkul's personal trophy collection are incomplete, Imperial intelligence suggests that he has accumulated trophies from nearly every major enemy faction, with Dreadnoughts featuring prominently. His campaigns on Armageddon alone brought him into conflict with numerous Space Marine chapters, and it's believed he kept several Dreadnoughts from these battles. What makes Gazkul different from typical Orc war bosses is his apparent understanding of the psychological value of such trophies. He doesn't just keep them for personal bragging rights, he uses them as tools of intimidation and propaganda. When he meets with other Orc war bosses to build his Wah, the presence of these trophies helps convince them that following him will lead to the best fights. When he negotiates, and yes, Gazkul does occasionally negotiate, having a backdrop of defeated enemy war machines sends a very clear message about what happens to those who oppose him. Another notable example is the Orc war boss known as Grimskull the Collector, who supposedly made it his personal mission to capture one Dreadnought from every Space Marine chapter he encountered. While the veracity of this legend is questionable, Orc tales speak of Grimskull's vast trophy haul, containing dozens of different Dreadnoughts, each bearing different chapter colors and heraldry. The story goes that Grimskull would study these trophies, learning the fighting styles of different chapters, using his collection as a kind of tactical database. In the Octarius sector, during the massive conflict between Orcs and Tyranids, orchestrated by Inquisitor Cryptman, an Orc war boss known as Claw Chief Urgok reportedly kept a Dreadnought from the Scythes of the Emperor chapter that had been fighting in the region. What made this particular trophy special was that Urgok supposedly kept it in a partially functional state, occasionally activating its weapon systems during celebrations to provide entertainment for his followers. The captured pilot, if he still lived, endured years of being used as a living fireworks display. The Bad Moons clan, being the wealthiest of the major Orc clans, have produced several war bosses known for their extensive trophy collections. One Bad Moons boss, name lost to history, but referred to in Imperial records as the Golden Git, supposedly covered his captured Dreadnoughts in gold paint and precious stones, turning them into gaudy displays of wealth as much as martial prowess. Other Orcs found this incredibly impressive, while Space Marines who heard of it considered it an additional layer of desecration. On the feral world of Angelus, an Orc war boss known as Big Mech Grimfang established what could only be described as a museum of war. Among his collection were 3 Dreadnoughts from different chapters, each positioned in a different pose, as if frozen in combat. Grimfang, being a mech, was more interested in these trophies as technical puzzles than as mere status symbols, but he still displayed them prominently and used them to establish his credentials when dealing with other war bosses. The Death Skulls clan naturally produces war bosses with extensive looted collections, and Dreadnoughts feature prominently in many of these. One Death Skulls boss, recorded in the annals of the Crimson Fists chapter as Blue Fang the Lucky, supposedly captured 4 of their dreadnoughts during the invasion of Rin's world. The Crimson Fists made recovering these trophies a priority during their revenge campaigns, dedicating significant resources to hunting down Bluefang and his warband. There are also darker stories, less well documented, but persistent in Orc legend and Imperial horror tales. Stories of Orc war bosses, who don't just keep their dreadnought trophies, but actively torment them, using them in gladiatorial games, forcing them to fight each other for Orc entertainment, or subjecting them to endless mechanical experiments. Whether these stories are true or exaggerated by repeated telling is unclear, but they speak to the worst possible fate a dreadnought pilot could suffer. Some war bosses develop reputations as dreadnought specialists, actively seeking out battles where they're likely to encounter these war machines. These bosses might pass up on easier conquests because they don't offer the possibility of adding to their collection. They're not just fighting for territory or resources, they're hunting for the most impressive trophies they can find, and dreadnoughts represent the pinnacle of that hunt. The competitive nature between these trophy-collecting war bosses creates interesting dynamics. They're aware of each other's collections and constantly trying to one-up each other. You got 2 dreadnoughts, I got 3. Yours are all from the same chapter. Mine are from 5 different chapters. This competition drives them to take risks they might not otherwise take, to seek out battles specifically because they might yield rare trophies, to treat war as much as a hunting expedition as a military campaign. The Imperial response. The Space Marine chapter's responses to the capture of their dreadnoughts by Orks reveals much about how they value these ancient warriors. Recovery operations are mounted with a level of urgency and resource commitment that often seems disproportionate from a purely military standpoint, but makes perfect sense when you understand what dreadnoughts represent to their chapters. When a chapter learns that one of their dreadnoughts has been captured by Orks, the reaction is immediate and severe. This isn't just losing a valuable piece of equipment, it's abandoning a brother, a hero, a living link to the chapter's history. The idea of leaving such a warrior in enemy hands, possibly suffering, possibly being desecrated, is unthinkable to most Space Marines. Recovery becomes a sacred duty that transcends normal tactical considerations. Recovery operations typically begin with intelligence gathering. The chapter needs to locate where the captured dreadnought is being held, determine the strength of the Orc forces guarding it, and assess whether the pilot still lives. This intelligence work is difficult. Orcs don't maintain detailed records, and their movements can be unpredictable. But Space Marine scouts and librarians employ every tool at their disposal to track down their lost brother. Once located, the recovery operation itself is planned with meticulous care. The goal isn't just to retrieve the dreadnought, but to do so while minimizing further damage to it, and, if possible, rescuing the pilot alive. This requires precision strikes, coordinated assaults, and often significant risk to the recovery team. Space Marines who might normally employ orbital bombardment or massive firepower must instead use more surgical approaches to avoid destroying what they're trying to recover. These operations often involve specialized units. Terminator squads might be deployed for their ability to smash through Orc defenses and create a safe corridor for the recovery. Assault squads provide rapid mobility to extract the dreadnought once it's secured. Tech Marines accompany the mission to stabilize the dreadnought systems and determine the pilot's status. The entire operation is typically led by experienced officers who understand the importance of what they're attempting. The Orc response to these recovery attempts varies. Some war bosses, recognizing they're under attack, will prioritize defending their trophy, sometimes even at the cost of tactical disadvantages elsewhere. They understand that losing such a prized trophy would damage their status significantly. Other war bosses might not realize the importance until it's too late, focusing on the general battle and only noticing their trophy is gone after the Space Marines have already extracted it. There have been cases where the recovery of a single dreadnought has turned into a multi-day battle, with Orcs and Space Marines fighting over this one objective while ignoring everything else happening in the wider conflict. The Orks see it as defending their most valuable loot, while the Space Marines see it as recovering their honored dead. Both sides commit forces out of proportion to the objective's military value, because to each of them, its symbolic value is immense. Not all recovery attempts succeed. Sometimes the Dreadnought has been too badly damaged, scattered across an Ork camp as components and scrap metal. Sometimes the pilot has died, leaving only an empty shell to recover. Sometimes the Orks have moved the trophy and the intelligence was outdated. And sometimes, despite their best efforts, the Space Marines simply can't break through Ork defenses without causing the very destruction they're trying to prevent. Failed recovery attempts weigh heavily on the chapters involved. Knowing that one of their brothers remains in Ork hands, potentially suffering, unable to die with honor, creates a burden of guilt and obligation. Some chapters will make multiple attempts, returning again and again to try to recover their fallen brother. Others, accepting that recovery is impossible, will instead focus on vengeance, hunting down the Ork warboss responsible and destroying him and all his forces, even if the Dreadnought itself cannot be saved. The successful recovery of a Dreadnought from Ork captivity is treated as a significant victory, often resulting in special ceremonies and honors for those involved in the recovery. The Dreadnought itself is thoroughly examined, blessed, and if possible, restored to service. If the pilot survived the capture, he's treated by the chapter's best apothecaries and given whatever support is needed to help him process the trauma of his captivity. Some pilots who survive Ork captivity never fully recover psychologically. The experience of being utterly helpless, treated as a thing rather than a warrior, subjected to the casual indifference of their captors, leaves scars that even Space Marine conditioning cannot fully heal. These pilots might be retired from service, their dreadnoughts preserved but no longer activated. They've given everything, endured more than should be asked of anyone, and earned their final rest. The recovery operations also serve as learning experiences for the chapters. They study Ork trophy-keeping behavior, trying to understand where captured dreadnoughts are likely to be kept, what defenses might be encountered, what condition the trophies might be in. This knowledge helps inform future operations, improving the chances of successful recovery. The philosophical implications. The practice of Orks keeping broken dreadnoughts as trophies raises interesting philosophical questions about the nature of trophy collecting, the treatment of captured enemies, and what it means to keep a defeated foe. These questions, while perhaps seeming abstract, actually illuminate important aspects of both Ork and human, Imperial, psychology. For the Orks, trophy keeping is straightforward. You defeat an enemy, you take something from them as proof, you display it to demonstrate your prowess. There's no deeper meaning, no complex psychology behind it. It's practical, it's understandable, and it serves clear social functions. The trophy proves the victory happened, impresses others, and provides entertainment value. Simple, brutal, effective. But from a human perspective, particularly from the Imperial perspective, this practice raises disturbing questions. What does it say about the Orks that they can't distinguish between keeping a broken machine and keeping a suffering person trapped within that machine? The answer is equally disturbing. It says they simply don't make that distinction. Person, machine. It's all the same to them. They're not being cruel, they're being indifferent, which might be worse. This indifference touches on broader questions about the nature of consciousness and personhood. The Imperium recognizes the Space Marine pilot within the Dreadnought as a person, a hero, a being worthy of respect and honor. The Orks recognize only the physical form of the Dreadnought, the big metal shell that fought them. If there's anyone inside, that's just a detail, not particularly relevant to the trophy's value. This fundamental disconnect in how personhood is recognized creates a gulf of understanding that can never really be bridged. The practice also raises questions about the ethics of trophy keeping in general. Most human cultures throughout history have collected trophies from defeated enemies in some form. Scalps, ears, weapons, flags. The practice is nearly universal. But there's usually some line drawn between taking a piece of a defeated enemy and keeping the entire enemy. The Orks, lacking human ethical frameworks, don't see any such line. If a Space Marine helmet is a good trophy, then a whole Space Marine in a Dreadnought is an even better trophy. From the Ork perspective, their treatment of captured Dreadnoughts is actually fairly benign. They're not actively trying to cause suffering. They're just keeping an impressive thing they captured. If asked, an Ork would probably be genuinely confused about why this upsets the Space Marines so much. We beat it fair and square. It's ours now. Why are they making such a fuss? This genuine incomprehension of the offense they're causing is darkly comedic in its own way. The philosophical question of whether something can be both a person and property is central here. The Imperium says no, a person cannot be property, at least not a Space Marine. The Orks don't even understand the question. To them, everything captured in battle becomes property of the victor. The fact that property might also be conscious is irrelevant to its status as property. This also touches on questions of dignity and how it's conferred or maintained. The Imperium confers great dignity on Dreadnought pilots, treating them as honored ancestors. But that dignity is conferred by others. The pilots themselves cannot maintain their own dignity when captured and helpless. The Orks, by treating the Dreadnought as just another trophy, strip away that conferred dignity without even realizing they're doing so. They're not attacking the pilot's dignity. They simply don't recognize it exists. The question of what the pilot experiences during captivity raises issues about the nature of suffering and whether suffering requires intention. The Ork doesn't intend to cause suffering, he's just keeping his trophy. But the pilot suffers anyway, profoundly. Does the lack of intent make it better or worse? From the pilot's perspective, it's arguably worse. At least if his captors were deliberately tormenting him, his suffering would have meaning, would be acknowledged. Being suffering as an accidental consequence of someone else's indifference might be the ultimate insult. The grimdark comedy. We return to where we began, the fundamental absurdity of the situation. A Space Marine Dreadnought, housing one of the Imperium's greatest heroes, reduced to a curiosity in an Ork warboss's trophy collection. It's tragic. It's horrifying. It's darkly comedic. It's perfectly Warhammer 40,000. The comedy comes not from the suffering itself, but from the disconnect between the perspectives. The Imperium sees the sacred warrior tomb being desecrated by Xenos savages. The Orks see a really cool trophy they got in a good fight. Neither perspective is wrong within its own cultural framework, but they're so completely incompatible that the juxtaposition becomes absurd. This is Warhammer 40,000's signature move, taking grim situations and finding the dark humor in them, not by making light of suffering, but by highlighting the absurdity of existence in this universe. A universe where the heroes are fascist super soldiers, where the good guys commit genocide as policy, where even death might not be escape. This universe doesn't do simple tragedy. It does complicated tragedy, mixed with absurdity, mixed with occasional moments of surprising poignancy. The Ork keeping a Dreadnought as a pet works as a storytelling device precisely because it operates on multiple levels simultaneously. It's a source of motivation for heroic rescue missions. It's a demonstration of how truly alien the Orks are. It's a meditation on the futility of meaning in an uncaring universe. It's a joke at the expense of the Imperium's pretensions to nobility. It's a genuine horror scenario for the captured pilot. All of these things at once. And that's what makes it perfect for this setting. Warhammer 40,000 has never been interested in simple narratives or uncomplicated emotions. It wants you to feel horrified and amused, sympathetic and disturbed, engaged and alienated, all at the same time. The broken Dreadnought in the Ork throne room achieves all of that. Tales from the trophy halls. The stories told by those who have witnessed Ork trophy collections firsthand provide visceral detail to what might otherwise remain abstract horror. These accounts, drawn from Imperial records, Space Marine chapter histories, And the debriefings of those rare individuals who survived encounters with Ork warbosses' personal domains paint a picture of what it actually looks like, feels like, to see these captured dreadnoughts in their new homes. Sergeant Malthius of the Ultramarines, during a rescue operation on the world of Kaltos, recorded his observations upon breaching an Ork fortress. The throne room was a charnel house decorated with the remains of 1,000 battles. But what drew the eye, what commanded attention despite the horror surrounding it, was the Dreadnought. One of our own, bearing the colours of the Nova Marines chapter, chained against the far wall like some enormous hound. Its armour was scarred beyond recognition, weapons torn away, but the sarcophagus remained intact. We could see the life support indicators still glowing faintly. Someone was still alive in there. The Ork warboss sat upon his throne, using our brother's tragedy as decoration, and I have never felt such pure hatred in all my years of service. Another account, from an Imperial Guard reconnaissance team, describes an Ork encampment where multiple dreadnoughts were displayed. They had them arranged in a circle, like some grotesque sculpture garden, 5 in total, each from a different chapter, each in varying states of damage. The Orks had painted crude glyphs on their armour, marked their own symbols over the sacred insignia of the Adeptus Astartes. Children, Gretchen young enough to barely walk, played around the feet of these fallen warriors, treating them as playground equipment. It was obscene in a way that made conventional desecration seem almost respectful by comparison. A particularly detailed account comes from Inquisitor Valerius of the Ordo Xenos, who infiltrated an Ork rock in disguise to gather intelligence. The trophy hall was vast, carved into the asteroid's interior, and it contained the spoils of centuries of warfare. But the centerpiece, the prize around which all else was arranged, was a dreadnought of the Blood Angels chapter. The Orks had not modified it, had not painted it, had barely touched it at all. They simply kept it, spotlit by captured promethium lamps, elevated on a platform of welded scrap metal. The warboss told me, through his interpreter, that this was his greatest kill, the fight that made his reputation. He spoke of it with something approaching reverence, though filtered through an Ork's complete inability to understand what he was describing. To him, it was just the best trophy from the best fight. The fact that a brother of Sanguinius, a warrior who had served for over 900 years, was likely still alive within that metal tomb, slowly going mad from isolation and captivity, simply did not register as relevant. These accounts share certain common elements. The display is always prominent, positioned where visitors cannot help but see it. The Orks clearly take pride in their captures, even if they don't fully understand what they have. And there's often evidence that, at least initially, attempts were made to interact with or activate the captured dreadnoughts, evidenced by crude Ork modifications, hasty repairs to damage, or jury-rigged power connections that suggest someone tried to get the machine working. Scout brother Taskius of the Raven Guard, who spent 3 months embedded with an Ork tribe gathering intelligence, provided insights into how the Orks themselves view these trophies. They don't see them as we do. To them, a dreadnought is impressive the same way a particularly large weapon is impressive, or a fast vehicle, or a dangerous beast. They'll pat it the way you might pat a favored attack dog. They'll show it off to visitors with the same pride someone might display a prized possession. The complete disconnect between their casual attitude and the magnitude of what they're actually keeping is disturbing beyond words. I watched an Ork knob use a captured dreadnought from the Aurora chapter as a backrest while he ate, completely oblivious to the fact that he was leaning against what we would consider a sacred relic, housing a revered hero. From the Black Templars comes the account of Chaplain Grimaldus's rescue operation on the Tower, world of Hades. We found 3 of our brothers in dreadnought form, all captured during the initial Ork invasion. 2 were empty shells, their pilots having died of their injuries before they could be recovered. But the third still lived. Brother Adelmar, who had fought in the Third Black Crusade, who had walked the galaxy for 2,000 years, who had earned his rest 100 times over. He had been in Ork hands for 4 months. When we breached his sarcophagus, the moment we restored his ability to communicate, he did not speak of what he had endured. He simply requested that we not return him to service, that we grant him the peace he should have found on the battlefield. We honored his request. Some prices are too high, even for the continued service of such a legendary warrior. These stories reveal patterns in how orcs maintain their trophies over time. Fresh captures receive the most attention, as mech boys prod and poke and try to understand them. Over months and years, interest wanes somewhat, though the trophy retains its value as a status symbol. By the time decades have passed, the Dreadnought might be one trophy among many, still valued, but no longer the centerpiece it once was. Unless, of course, it comes from a particularly prestigious chapter, or represents an especially memorable fight, in which case it remains a focal point indefinitely. The rare escapes. While most Dreadnoughts captured by Orks remain in captivity until either destroyed, recovered by their chapters, or the pilot finally dies, there are rare recorded instances of escape attempts. These stories, few though they are, provide both hope and additional horror, showing what's possible when a pilot retains enough agency and the circumstances align just right. The most famous escape is that of venerable ancient Malkarian of the Night Lords before their fall to chaos, who was captured by Orks during the Great Crusade. According to Night Lords' records, Malkarian spent 3 weeks in Ork captivity before managing to activate his Dreadnought's emergency power reserves during an Ork celebration. The temporary power surge allowed him to break his chains and fight his way to the edge of the Ork camp, where he was recovered by his battle brothers. The escape was seen as such an impressive feat that it became part of Night Lord's lore, taught to newer generations as an example of never surrendering even in impossible circumstances. A more tragic attempt comes from the Lamenters chapter, whose brother, ancient Chironex, was captured during the Badab War's aftermath. Ork records, translated by Ordo Xenos specialists, suggest that Chironex maintained enough control over his Dreadnought's systems to attempt a self-destruct sequence, preferring death to continued captivity. The attempt failed due to damage to the power plant, but it did start a fire that destroyed a significant portion of the Ork camp. The Orks found this hilarious and began referring to Chironex as Da Bernie Tin Boy, completely missing that what they were witnessing was an act of desperate defiance. From the Crimson Fists comes the account of ancient Argo, who was captured during the Ork assault on Rin's world. Argo spent 2 months in captivity before a bombardment from an Imperial Navy frigate damaged the structure holding him, creating an opportunity. With limited power and one functioning weapon arm, Argo managed to drag himself several kilometers through Ork-held territory before being recovered by Crimson Fist's scouts. His recovery inspired the chapter to intensify their efforts to hunt down every Ork who had participated in the invasion, particularly those who had taken trophies. These escapes, rare as they are, require several factors to align. The Dreadnought must have some power reserves remaining or the ability to access external power. The pilot must remain conscious and sane enough to plan and execute an escape. The Orks must be sufficiently distracted or incompetent in their guarding. And there must be some possibility of reaching friendly forces, or at least getting far enough away to make a rescue feasible. Given how rarely all these factors align, it's no surprise that most captured Dreadnoughts never escape. Some escapes are less about the pilot's agency and more about circumstances overtaking events. Dreadnoughts have been recovered when the Ork camp they were in was attacked by different enemies: Tyranids, other Ork warbands, Chaos forces. In the confusion, allowing Imperial forces to retrieve them. Others have been found abandoned when Ork warbands moved on, deciding the trophy was too heavy to transport and not worth the effort. The psychological state of pilots who do manage to escape or be rescued varies dramatically. Some maintain their sanity and their will to continue serving, viewing their captivity as just another trial endured in service to the Emperor. Others are permanently damaged by the experience, able to function but carrying trauma that affects their performance and their interactions with battle brothers. A few, the rarest cases, actually seem stronger for having endured and escaped, having proven to themselves that even in the darkest circumstances, even when all hope seems lost, defiance is possible. The future of the practice. As the 41st millennium grinds on and the galaxy becomes ever more chaotic, the Ork practice of keeping dreadnought trophies shows no signs of diminishing. If anything, as Ork wars become larger and more frequent, as the barriers between the Imperium and its enemies break down, opportunities for Orks to encounter and capture dreadnoughts may actually be increasing. The introduction of Primaris Space Marines and their Redemptor-pattern dreadnoughts has given Orks new targets. These newer, larger dreadnoughts are especially appealing to Ork war bosses for the same reason the original dreadnoughts were. They're big, they're tough, and they're impressively killy. The fact that Redemptor dreadnoughts burn through their pilots faster than traditional patterns means that captured Redemptors are less likely to have living pilots, which might be seen as a mercy, though it also means the loss of ancient knowledge and experience that traditional dreadnoughts preserve. The ongoing conflicts across the galaxy, from the opening of the Great Rift to the rising tide of chaos to the Tyrannid invasions, all create opportunities for Orks to encounter Space Marines in desperate battles where dreadnoughts might be deployed and potentially captured. Every major war zone becomes a potential hunting ground for Ork war bosses seeking to add to their trophy collections. Some Ork mech boys are reportedly getting better at maintaining and even partially operating captured dreadnoughts. Whether this represents actual technological advancement or just more successful trial and error is unclear, but there are increasing reports of Orks managing to get looted dreadnoughts to move under some level of control. These orked-up dreadnoughts remain rare and unreliable, but their very existence suggests that Ork understanding of these machines is slowly improving. From the Imperial perspective, the challenge of recovering captured dreadnoughts is likely to grow more difficult as Ork warbands become larger and better organized. The resources required for recovery operations remain constant, while the forces arrayed against such operations increase. Some chapters may be forced to make the painful decision that certain captured brothers simply cannot be recovered, that the cost in lives and materiel would be too high. These decisions, pragmatic though they might be, weigh heavily on chapters that pride themselves on never abandoning their own. The cultural significance of dreadnought trophies within Ork society seems to be intensifying rather than diminishing. As different Ork clans and warbands compete for dominance, having the most impressive trophy collection becomes an increasingly important status marker. This creates a kind of arms race in trophy acquisition, with war bosses actively seeking out battles, specifically because they offer opportunities to capture rare and valuable prizes. There's also speculation among Ordo Xenos scholars that Ork trophy-keeping behavior might be evolving. Some reports suggest that certain war bosses are becoming more sophisticated in how they manage their collections, preserving trophies more carefully, displaying them more strategically, even trading or gifting particularly valuable items to secure alliances or advantage. Whether this represents genuine cultural evolution or just individual war bosses showing unusual intelligence remains subject to debate. Conclusion: The Endless War's strangest trophy. As we reach the end of this exploration into one of Warhammer 40,000's darkest and strangest practices, we're left with a deeper understanding of both the Orks and the Imperium they fight. The broken dreadnoughts in Ork trophy. Halls represent everything that makes this setting unique. The grinding horror of endless war, the absolute alienness of the various factions, the dark comedy of perspective, and the occasional moments of genuine tragedy that cut through all the grimdark posturing. For the Orks, keeping broken dreadnoughts is entirely logical. They're impressive trophies from good fights. They establish status and reputation. They're fun to show off, and they might even yield useful parts or knowledge. The fact that there might be someone suffering inside is simply not a consideration, not because Orks are cruel, but because they're genuinely incapable of processing that suffering as relevant. For the Imperium, The capture of a dreadnought represents a multi-layered tragedy. A hero is lost, sacred technology is defiled, ancient knowledge might be destroyed, and a warrior who deserved an honorable death is instead subjected to a fate that makes his centuries of service seem like a prelude to ultimate humiliation. The recovery of such trophies becomes a sacred duty, regardless of the cost. And for us, the observers of this fictional universe, it serves as a perfect encapsulation of what makes Warhammer 40,000 work. It's horrible, it's fascinating, it's darkly funny, and it makes perfect sense within its own internal logic, while being completely insane by any normal standard. The broken dreadnought chained in an Ork throne room is both deeply sad and somehow hilarious, tragic and absurd, meaningful and meaningless, all at the same time. The practice also reminds us that in the grim darkness of the far future, there truly is only war, but that war takes forms we might never expect. It's not just battle lines and strategic objectives. It's also Ork war bosses collecting the broken remains of their enemies, like a macabre version of stamp collecting. It's space marines undertaking desperate rescue missions for brothers who might prefer death to rescue. It's ancient warriors suffering fates worse than any death in the darkness of their metal tombs. This is Warhammer 40,000 at its best, taking horrific concepts and examining them through multiple lenses, finding both the tragedy and the dark comedy, never flinching from the implications of its grimdark universe, while also never taking itself so seriously that it loses sight of how absurd it all is. The Ork with his dreadnought trophy is a perfect distillation of the setting's ethos. So the next time you see an Ork army on the tabletop, or read about an Ork war boss in the lore, or think about the green tide sweeping across Imperial worlds, remember the broken dreadnoughts in their trophy halls. Remember the space marines entombed within them, the chapters trying to recover them, and the Orks who keep them without really understanding what they have. Remember that war in the 41st millennium isn't just about who wins and who loses, but about what happens to those caught in between, and how the same event can be viewed completely differently depending on whose eyes you're looking through. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the weird and wonderful world of Warhammer 40,000 lore, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. There's always more grim darkness to explore, more bizarre faction behaviors to analyze, and more fascinating details to uncover in this incredible setting. The Emperor protects, the Warg never ends, and somewhere out there, a broken dreadnought waits in an Ork trophy hall, a monument to the endless brutality and strange absurdity of the far future. Thanks for watching, and remember, in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war, but sometimes there's also really cool trophies. The symbolism and meaning, beyond the practical and cultural aspects we've explored, the phenomenon of Orks keeping broken dreadnoughts carries deeper symbolic weight within the Warhammer 40,000 universe. It represents collision points between different ways of understanding reality, different systems of meaning, different approaches to existence itself. The dreadnought itself is perhaps the most potent symbol in Space Marine culture of the intersection between duty, sacrifice, and transformation. A Space Marine who accepts interment chooses continued service over the peace of death. He accepts transformation into something that is no longer quite human, perhaps never was fully human given the genetic modifications, but becomes even less so when merged with a machine. He accepts isolation from the brotherhood he values above all else, sealed in metal, awakened only for war. This choice, this sacrifice, is what the Imperium holds up as the highest ideal. When an Ork captures such a symbol and reduces it to a trophy, he unwittingly strikes at the very heart of Imperial meaning-making. He demonstrates, through his actions, if not his intention, that all this sacrifice, all this meaning, all this reverence can be rendered meaningless by simple force. The dreadnought that represents centuries of service, the accumulated wisdom of ages, the living embodiment of chapter history, becomes just another cool thing, an orc grabbed in a fight. The contrast between these two perspectives could not be more stark. For the Imperium, this represents a kind of existential horror beyond mere physical death or destruction. Physical defeat can be endured, territories can be reclaimed, losses can be avenged, but the reduction of their most sacred symbols to mere loot, to curiosities in an alien trophy case, attacks the very framework through which they understand their existence. If a dreadnought can be reduced to this, if such service can end in such meaningless degradation, what does that say about all the other sacrifices made in the Emperor's name? The Orks' complete indifference to this symbolic weight makes it somehow worse. If Chaos forces capture a dreadnought, they understand its significance and deliberately defile it, which creates a kind of dark meaning, in opposition to Imperial meaning. The Chaos Defiler recognizes what the dreadnought represents and attacks it for exactly that reason. There's a terrible logic to it, a coherent framework where Imperial meaning is replaced with Chaos meaning. But the Orc just thinks it's a cool trophy. He doesn't understand the significance, doesn't care about the meaning, isn't trying to make any kind of statement. His actions strip meaning away, not through opposition, but through sheer incomprehension. This absolute void, where meaning should be, might be more disturbing than active malice. From a narrative perspective, this symbolism does important work. It reminds us that in the Warhammer 40,000 universe, meaning is not inherent. It's imposed by those who create it, maintained by those who believe in it, and can be destroyed by those who simply don't participate in that meaning-making system. The Imperium's desperate attempts to maintain their frameworks of meaning and significance are constantly under attack, not just by enemies who oppose them, but by enemies who don't even acknowledge that those frameworks exist. The contrast also highlights the fundamental philosophy of each faction. The Imperium seeks meaning through sacrifice, through duty, through service to something greater than the individual. The Space Marines exemplify this philosophy, with dreadnoughts representing its ultimate expression. The Orks, conversely, seek meaning through immediate experience, through the joy of combat, through proving themselves in the moment. The concept of sacrifice for future benefit, of deferred gratification, of accepting suffering now for meaning later, these ideas are completely alien to Orc psychology. This philosophical gulf creates the conditions where a dreadnought can be simultaneously the most honored warrior in a chapter and a curiosity in an Orc's collection. Neither perspective is wrong within its own framework, but the frameworks are so completely incompatible that reconciliation is impossible. The Imperium cannot make the Orcs understand what they're desecrating, because the Orcs lack the conceptual framework to process that understanding. The Orcs cannot make the Imperium understand that they're just keeping a cool trophy, because the Imperium cannot separate the physical object from all the meaning they've invested in it. This unbridgeable gap of understanding is itself symbolic of the Warhammer 40,000 universe's broader themes. This is a setting where different factions don't just fight over resources or territory, they fight from fundamentally incompatible worldviews. The Imperium's human-centric fascism, the Orcs' joy in violence, the Eldar's arrogant superiority, the Tyranids' hunger, the Chaos God's manipulation. These aren't just different political positions or cultural practices. They're different ways of existing, different frameworks for understanding reality itself. The broken dreadnought in the Orc trophy hall becomes a physical manifestation of this fundamental incompatibility. It exists simultaneously in multiple symbolic frameworks that cannot be reconciled. To the Imperium, it's sacred. To the Orcs, it's loot. Both of these things are true. Neither can be reduced to the other. The dreadnought simply is both things at once, trapped in the space between incompatible meaning systems, just as the galaxy itself exists in the space between incompatible worldviews, locked in eternal conflict. And perhaps that's the deepest horror and the darkest comedy of it all. Not just that terrible things happen in this universe, but that they happen for no reason that would satisfy anyone seeking meaning. The dreadnought pilot doesn't suffer because the Orcs hate him or want to hurt him. He suffers because he's there, and the Orks are indifferent. The Imperium doesn't fail to recover him because they don't care, but because the uncaring universe doesn't align with their attempts to impose meaning on it. The Ork doesn't understand why the Imperium is upset, because there's literally no framework through which he could understand it. This is Warhammer 40,000's ultimate statement. Not that the universe is hostile, though it is, but that it's indifferent. The meaning you seek, the significance you crave, the justice you demand, none of it exists unless you create it and fight to maintain it. And even then, someone else might come along who doesn't share your framework and reduce all your meaning to nothing through simple incomprehension. The broken Dreadnought reminds us that in the grim darkness of the far future, meaning is fragile, victory is temporary, and sometimes the worst fate isn't to be destroyed by those who hate you, but to be kept as a curiosity by those who don't understand enough to hate you properly.